When it comes to High on Life, I've seen many reviewers and gaming outlets describe it as you'll either love it or you'll hate it. While I understand the sentiment behind that, it's not one that applies to my experience. That perspective stems from the title's reliance on humor as one of its defining features, and the subjectivity of comedy means it will entertain some while turning others away. While there certainly are people who love this game and others who hate it, it's important to acknowledge that perspectives on games are rarely so black and white. There will always be people finding themselves somewhere in the middle, either positively or negatively skewed, and that's where I find myself. I view my time with this game as an overall net positive. It's by no means my game of the year, but it certainly slotted in nicely during the final weeks of 2022, especially because of its simplicity and shorter runtime after tackling a bunch of huge games throughout the year. Simple really is a good word to describe this game, both in the complexity of its gameplay as well as the level of its lowbrow sense of humor. Justin Roiland's brand of comedy is a pretty well-known commodity nowadays, namely because of the success of Rick and Morty. He's of course been a part of other projects, shows, and games, but the critical hit of that show in particular is what elevated him to the mainstream. It's a comedy basis that many fans are beginning to grow tired of, while others continue to enjoy its style. However, to have one of those two mindsets, you first must be familiar with Roiland's content. And as for me, I'm not. I've never watched a single episode of Rick and Morty, and Roiland's name meant little to me before playing. For me, High on Life's tagline about being an FPS where the guns were characters was what lured me in, not the acclaimed voice actor, director, and writer himself. So as I started playing and getting to know Kenny and Gus, Sweezy, Creature, and of course, those being the talking weapons, I felt what was promised was delivered. Each gun is basically a one-note personality archetype. Kenny is the anxious, stuttering introvert, Creature is a kind soul with a habit for self-loathing, and Let's Do It, well, he's that cliche character that only repeats the same line, kinda like a Pokemon. On their own, they don't provide a whole lot, as their branded style of humor begins to lose its effect after just a few interactions with them. After a few sentences, you'll understand the entire spiel of each character. However, when combined, they play off of each other very well, given their different personalities and perspectives. They talk a lot, which will annoy some people, no doubt, but I came to appreciate each of them when they were a small part of a flawed group. The only thing that really got on my nerves was how insistent the weapons are on you using their trick abilities or just using them in general. They comment on it nearly every time you pull them out.
I get it, I'm not your favorite Gatlian. I know, it's all good though.
Besides that though, the amount of dialogue, it didn't bother me. The simple personality traits play well into a game that doesn't take itself too seriously. Roiland and his team have a partial focus on bringing comedy into their games. Hell, it's right there on the Squanch Games website. As a result, High on Life is jam-packed with jokes. Some hit, and some don't. I never found myself laughing out loud or busting up, save for one instance where Applebee's is used as a punchline as they make it synonymous with life in the slums. That one got me. That was pretty funny. Besides this, I mostly found myself chuckling or scoffing depending on how each joke landed. The most relevant comedy to me were the jokes aimed at video game tropes, such as the bits that take jabs at video game tutorials or detective modes. The self-aware and fourth wall breaking humor really worked well in this regard, and I found myself enjoying it. The jabs are by no means vicious, as instead they offer up some cheeky grins and chuckles like something akin to a Comedy Central roast. Humor in games is something that's hard to pull off.
Bedrooms are there, the kitchen is just over there. Anybody need a snack? Kratos? Snack?
I do not need a snack.
It works well in one-off instances in serious games, but when games try to be funny, it often comes off as forced. The funniest games instead tend to be ones based off of existing IPs, like the somewhat recent South Park games. But for what it is, I think High on Life does it about as well as you can, and for that, I give it props. So that's a bit about the characters. I mentioned them first, alongside of the humor, because those play a bigger role than the overall narrative. The idea of the game is that Earth is invaded by aliens, and it's up to you, alongside of those talking guns, to stop the extraterrestrial gang that's responsible. It turns out the aliens invaded Earth because, well, they can smoke humans to get high, and the entire species will be wiped out unless you complete bounties, knocking out lower level members of their cartel before reaching the big bad himself. This alien group called the G3 is expanded on a bit as you play, but mostly just to keep the story moving. Again, there's nothing deep here. The other part of the story is about the relationship between the player character, his sister, her alien boyfriend, and another alien degenerate named Gene, who is a pseudo-mentor for the player. Gene is a washed-up bounty hunter who guides you on your journey to save the humans. He's developed a tiny bit as you play, but again, it's simple stuff here, nothing earth-shattering. Meanwhile, your relationship with your sister Lizzie is pretty basic as well. You're often forced into these sections where you resolve fights between Lizzie and Gene by siding with one or the other. To put it simply, the conflict isn't very interesting, and your choices here don't matter, making it a giant waste of time. I'm not sure if this is Roiland's team trying to poke fun at games that offer the illusion of choice, but I don't think so. So many other jokes that reference video game tropes are made obvious to the player, letting them know that the developers are in on it too. But that doesn't happen with these sections, making me think the team thought these were interesting when they just aren't. There's no real reason to care. The simple story is a dual-edged sword in this regard. Sometimes the simplicity works in the game's favor, but when the player is trapped into meaningless, supposed character development, it falls on its face. The game also falters with its ending, which is extremely anticlimactic. Both the final boss, as well as with how the story ends, it all feels like a letdown and happens very abruptly. That note about the final boss is especially resonant because, believe it or not, the other boss fights in this game were some of the most inventive and clever I experienced this year. Before we get to that though, let's talk a little bit about the combat. Again, simplicity is the name of the game. You'll start off with a basic pistol named Kenny. He's capable of a single shot, as well as a special move called the Glob Shot that will stun enemies and launch them into the air. This single gun loses its luster quickly, but as you continue to play and unlock more of your arsenal, things improve drastically. Kenny is but a mere pistol, but there's also Gus the shotgun, Sweezy the automatic rifle, and Creature, who is like the Doom Glove from Ratchet & Clank. He shoots out AI companions who do chip damage. And then of course there's Let's Do It, a powerful laser gun that unlocks in the final mission. Each of these guns has their basic function, but just like Kenny, they each have a unique ability, such as Gus's ricocheting discs, Sweezy's slowing of time, or Creature's mind control. You'll also unlock extra movement abilities as you play, such as a jetpack and a power slide. And once you have all of these tools, both the weapons and those movement options, combat becomes a ton of fun, as you fly around, shooting enemies, avoiding damage, and using your abilities in quick succession. It's not deep, but it is satisfying, and it's perfect for a game like this. Back to those bosses now, and many feel like they have their own thing going for them. Some are standard, such as Nine Torque and Krupus, but others have interesting twists. For example, the Skrendel brothers can fight you 3-on-1 or combine into one big dude, kinda like a mech. They switch back and forth between these modes during the fight, which keeps you on your toes. Meanwhile, there's other interesting ideas like Nipulon, who fights you inside your mind. And there's even another boss who can be killed early if you're paying attention. I don't want to spoil many of these fights because they were the best part of the game by far. But when you're not fighting, you'll often be exploring. There's a few different collectibles to gather through platforming and careful studying of the environment. Secrets are also a notable part of the game for those seeking them out. I won't spoil any here, but there's new areas and characters to stumble into if you pay attention and remember the abilities your weapons yield. I mean, keep in mind many of your combat super abilities like the glob shot are used outside of combat as well for level progression and movement. But perhaps the most important thing to remember for discovering secrets is that each gun is also a character. Perhaps switching to certain ones at certain times will give you insight that you and the other weapons didn't pick up on. And I love when games do stuff like this, and High on Life needs to be commended for it. So be sure to switch out your arsenal. Now for presentation and performance. The art direction utilized by Roiland and Squanch Games here was one of a kind this year. It's definitely one of those styles that pops out in a sea of daily releases, grabbing your eyes and attention even if it isn't the most visually stunning. In many ways, this game could pass for an early PlayStation 4 title, but that doesn't really bother me that much when the art direction is so strong and consistent throughout. A lot of work has gone into making the Gatlian guns look detailed, especially when compared to environmental objects, since your focus will be on them a lot of the time, and I think it worked out well. The music itself was nothing special, but what really caught my ear was the voice work. You'll recognize a lot of well-known actors and celebrities in this game. Most notable to me was Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob, but also Randall in the Netflix original series Paradise PD. I mention that because the humor level, as well as Kenny's chosen voice for this character, are very similar to that show. Besides this though, you'll find yourself recognizing many voices throughout the game. Each performance is the right level of zany to make the characters come to life as the caricatures they are. Finally, I should note that this game is a little bit buggy and unpolished. Nothing that detracts from the title or makes it feel unfinished, but just enough that it's clear a little more development time could have been useful. For example, I had this glitch where my character didn't hold the guns properly and instead clipped through them. Overall though, while the presentation and performance were far from being the best on the year, I think it was fine for a game of this length and ambition. Before we wrap this up, there is one final point of debate that I want to comment on. There are those boycotting this game because of its use of AI-generated art. Many of the in-game posters feature art that isn't made by actual artists, but instead created by computers who are quote-unquote inspired by images they've been fed by real artists. Those pieces of inspiration aren't credited to anyone in particular, and meanwhile, it also robs other artists of a potential job. And while it isn't something I feel personally passionate about, I think those who are protesting this practice are well within their right to do so, especially because of the implications it may have on future games. If all developers go down this route in an attempt to save money, the already volatile industry of game development will become more turbulent, and many artists will struggle to find work in a field that's already ultra competitive. So it's something to keep an eye on. But anyway, despite what some will think, I believe every year needs at least one game like High on Life. For as controversial as it may be, it's just nice to play a game that isn't afraid to do something different, to take jabs at the industry, to believe in its core gameplay loop instead of packing a title with bloat, to include secrets some players will never find, and to alienate some potential players by going with this style of comedy. Not every game needs to be loved by every person, and I'm a firm believer in developers making the experience that they want to make, even if it won't click with everyone. How even the most generic games, designed to engage as wide a net of people as possible, will still be unappealing to someone. So by all means, make the game you want to make. If it's niche, so be it. You can't make everyone happy. And as for me, you can love or hate what I'm about to say, but High on Life was just a game that I simply liked. Thanks for watching. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out my short review of High on Life. Given the polarity of this game, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it in the comments below. Did you like it? Did you hate it? And why? Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Consider subscribing for more. Follow me on Twitter at NopeNapNarp. Join our Discord, the link is below. And as always, have a nice day and take care.